Good morning. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker at today's program, Chancellor of Rutgers University, Newark, Nancy Cantor. Chancellor Cantor is well recognized nationally and internationally as a distinguished leader in higher education, especially by her strong leadership in emphasizing the role of universities as anchor institutions in their communities and in promoting publicly engaged scholarship to advance racial equity and equitable growth. Prior to her current position, she was chancellor and the president of Syracuse University, where the breadth, depth, and the success of her effort to foster mutually beneficial collective impact initiatives between the university and the community earned her one of the highest honors in higher education, the Carnegie Corporation Academic Leadership Award in 2008. Chancellor Cantor has also served as a chancellor of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, provost and executive vice president for academic affairs at the University of Michigan. She is also a fellow of the National Academy of Medicine and the American Academy of Arts and Science. Welcome, Chancellor Cantor. Nancy?
Thank you, Dean Lay. I'm delighted to join you this morning to welcome you back to the second day of this critically important gathering, including partners both local and global from academia and the corporate and NGO sectors, and importantly from across the generations, all committed to making the Sustainable Development Goals the guideposts for responsible management education. And guideposts they must be if we're going to confront squarely and forthrightly what we in this country and in the state of New Jersey are seeing as a perfect storm. The triple threat of long-term systemic inequities, mounting climate change, and surging COVID-19, all intersecting to produce a fervent call for a new, more sustainable, more normal, more just normal, not a return to the status quo. That status quo has blocked opportunity for so many talented generations here and across the globe. Things must change, and responsible education and practice with Sustainable Development Goals front and center is a good place to start. So where then do we start as we pursue a more equitable, sustainable world, in part through responsible education and practice? Well, cliche as it may sound, I say we start at home. And by that I mean geographically, digging deeply into our local communities in order to draw lessons and solutions with global resonance, institutionally, committing our institutions, organizations, businesses to local social impact, collaboratively, creating public-private partnerships and collective impact tables that cross sectors and gather insights across disciplines and lived experiences, sustainably organizing a collaborative infrastructure for the long haul, and at last, but definitely not least, generationally, doubling down on paving the way and clearing the systemic obstacles to cultivate the talent of the next diverse generation of change makers. And so in my brief remarks this morning, I'll try to unpack and illustrate these 5 dimensions that I see as constituting a start at home and go from there strategy. And when I say start at home, you may say that's parochial, but I hope it has some resonance beyond. So we're going to start at home with our work at Rutgers Newark as an anchor institution in and of the city of Newark, as we like to say. So let's start at home geographically. The starting place for Rutgers Newark's commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals is indeed right at home in Newark, New Jersey, as an anchor institution that takes seriously its responsibility to be an engine of equitable growth in this majority Black and brown city, built over generations, more than 350 years old, this city, waves of migration and immigration, a place of talent and persistent resilience, but one that so represents the paradoxes of the two Americas of which Martin Luther King Jr. spoke some half-century ago. Newark is a city where in 2017, as described by our partners at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, only 18% of the many thousands of jobs in the city were held by Newark residents, 18%. And 60% of the people employed in Newark were white in this majority Black and brown city. Their report goes on to document a landscape of racialized inequity in a city with multiple Fortune 500 companies, major transportation hubs, performing arts centers and museums, higher education institutions, hospitals, and substantial real estate development growing by the day. In other words, there's substantial opportunity here in Newark, and I know this to be true in all the communities represented in this conference across the globe. But there are also systemic obstacles to dismantle. Nevertheless, progress can happen and indeed is happening. For example, we see the success of Mayor Baraka's citywide Newark 2020 initiative. This was begun in 2017 when he asked 16 large anchor institutions, including Rutgers, to pledge to collectively hire 2,020 Newarkers by 2020. And this has happened. As they say, where there's a will, there's a way, when anchor institutions step to the plate of equitable growth. And I'm proud to say that Rutgers, which had a goal from that initiative of hiring 220 Newark residents, has way surpassed that, hiring 572 Newarkers between that 3-year period. And recently, Governor Murphy, alongside many major CEOs, announced a similar program for all of New Jersey. So the second dimension of a strategy of social impact at home is to really take the role of anchor institutions, not only in terms of human capital and financial resources, as implicated, for example, in the 2020 initiative, but also to think about the expertise that an institution can bring to bear to inform equitable growth solutions. For higher education, this centers, of course, on the publicly engaged scholarship that we can contribute. And let me focus for a moment on 3 examples out of many led by RBS scholars, Rutgers Business School scholars, making a huge difference right here in Newark and beyond. First, consider the extraordinary work of Kevin Lyons and his colleagues at RBS's Public-Private Community Partnership Program. So Kevin and his team have been analyzing, mapping, and connecting all of the diverse suppliers, especially small and mid-sized manufacturers, and there are over 500 in Newark, to procurement demands of the major anchor institutions. Their work smooths the way for long-term sourcing contracts and enables these local minority and women-owned businesses to grow. And how do they grow? They typically hire fellow Newarkers. So we're doing both hire local and buy local, but when we think of this successful initiative. And Rutgers Newark has increased, for example, our local sourcing from 21% of our procurement to 30% in just the last 3 years. So Kevin and his team are now focusing, importantly, on the gaps in the local supplier chain, with an eye towards growing precisely the businesses in Newark that can fill these gaps with local talent. And speaking of growing local talent and local businesses, that's precisely what our colleagues, Rutgers colleagues Linnea Richardson and Jeff Robinson, whom I think you will hear from later in this program, from QID, the Center for Entrepreneurship and Economic Development, that's what they're doing. They are growing an innovative Black and Latino technology angel investment fund located right here and getting philanthropists and private sector and public sector dollars. And let me quote them when they say, the angel fund seeks to change the fact that less than 1% of all high growth technology startups in this country are led by African Americans or Latinos. Once again, one route to equitable growth is to recognize who is often left out of the growth economy and to rectify that landscape. As another of our superb Rutgers Business School entrepreneurship scholars, Ted Baker, and his colleagues at RAISED, this Rutgers Advanced Institute for the Study of Entrepreneurship and Development, are doing. So they have this amazing cutting edge program called Are You Flourishing? Focusing on the business ideas of previously incarcerated entrepreneurs in New Jersey. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite as powerful as a demonstration of social impact than seeing before our very eyes an equitable map of homegrown entrepreneurs flourishing. So let me think about the third dimension, and that's collaboratively. One of the many lessons to be garnered from the social impact work of our colleagues, as I've just spoken of, and what they're doing in Newark in redrawing the equitable growth map, is that it takes a strong, collective, collaborative, cross-sector, cross-institutional enterprise. It takes, as they say, all hands on deck. Part of the necessity for this collaborative, multidisciplinary, multi-sector approach is that systemic obstacles come in bundles. They come in packages. As Chuck Tilley, former sociologist and longtime colleague of mine, now passed, said, durable inequality is built over generations. It's built across education and workforce development and health and public safety and environmental justice. They're all intersecting to form a puzzle. So when we do this collective impact work, this social impact work for the development goals that the UN has, we've got to bring in a large cross-sector collaborative team. So in the Newark City of Learning Collaborative, for example, where we're trying to raise the post-secondary attainment rate of residents of Newark so they can go on to all these jobs in these Fortune 500 companies, we need the corporate sector, we need the Newark Public Schools, we need the libraries, we need nonprofits like the United Way, and we need City Hall. And we need all the educational institutions working together. This shouldn't surprise anybody in this conference because the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are all intersecting in just this same way. If we're going to make progress on the social determinants of health, if we're going to make progress on climate change, if we're going to look at economic growth and equitable growth, if we're going to look at gender and race and how they intersect inequitably in so much of our society, we need everybody at the table. I always look to my friend Scott Page, business scholar at Michigan, who said, it's a diversity bonus when you bring everybody together across the corporate, educational, public sector tables, when you bring all the lived experience to the table. So let me then go to the fourth dimension of the at-home strategy of social impact, and that is what I call sustainability. That is, you can't pursue a mobilization effort for the global goals for sustainable development without thinking of the long-term horizon. As I often say, the systems that have inequitably distributed resources and marginalized whole communities from opportunity did not arise overnight. And we must therefore be prepared to encounter, recognize, and confront their sequelae for a long time to come. Perhaps the best example in this country of this is the effect of de jure and de facto redlining practices in real estate and banking and government that produce so many of our urban neighborhoods today. They produce neighborhoods where there are no trees and sweltering heat, where the schools are doubly segregated by race and class, where the health and nutrition of residents is affected by food deserts and poor access to health care. And of course, where there's diminished personal equity and hampered intergenerational wealth transfer. If you look at Richard Rothstein's book that I recommend to everybody called The Color of Law, you see the generations over which these practices in real estate and banking and government produced a whole puzzle of issues that we need to sort out. So we need to recognize that when we create these collaborative, collective impact tables of anchor institutions and community groups and public officials and artists and entrepreneurs and students and scholars, we can't be doing it for a one and done project or a class or a policy or an innovation. We've got to be in there for the long haul. And that brings me back to what I see as the centerpiece of this conference, and that is we have to engage, cultivate, and empower the talent locally of the next generation of change makers. And then we allow their voices to resonate globally. So the final and probably most important dimension I see of social impact strategies at home that then resonate globally is really to think about the budding next generation of professionals, academics, public leaders. Think of them as active citizens directly on the ground with the challenges facing our frontline communities. This is not a time to educate students in an ivory tower, if ever there was a time for that monastic approach. And when I think about inspiration for this, I look to the recently passed and amazing legacy of the Congressman John Lewis, who stood for what he called good trouble. As Congressman Lewis said, when this country and world, what we need is ordinary citizens with extraordinary vision to take up the mantle of democracy. Democracy is not a state, he said. It's an act of engagement. And that's what this conference is all about. And all the things I've mentioned in Newark so far depend on and involve that next generation of change makers. We've got to empower them. We see this in our Honors Living Learning community at Rutgers Newark. It's a cross-campus program dedicated to local citizenship in a global world. Recently, for example, they've been working with the Humanities Action Lab Network, that's a global network, on climates of inequality. So they partner with community environmental activists, scientists, business folks, and public humanists to tell the story of decades of toxic pollution in the Iron Mountain in Newark. And most importantly, to point a way to a more sustainable future. They know how to find that future, and we have to listen to them and empower them. That's what Ted Baker and Tim Eatman, the dean of HLLC, are doing when they open up just down the street from the business school, the Urban Solutions Lab, as it will be called. And to quote Ted, this will convene a diverse array of stakeholders, educators, researchers, and the students who will become the next generation pro-social leaders in business, government, and civil society. The Urban Solutions Lab will serve as an engine generating the cross-disciplinary and cross-sector efforts that we believe are essential to pro-social entrepreneurship. It'll be a nerve center for both current and new entrepreneurship initiatives. And with that, I'll end my comments because I think it brings us full circle in representing the 5 dimensions that I see of real social impact: geographic, institutional, collaborative, sustainable, and generational. The way we build space and place for impact at home that will resonate globally and that will bring us all to those 17 UN Global Sustainable Goals. Have a great rest of your conference.
Thank you, Nancy. That was incredibly inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm Jeana Wirtenberg, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome everyone to the second day of the 5th UN Prime Northeast Conference on Sustainable Development Goals, Transforming Business and Practice. Incredibly, we have over 1,000 people now registered for the conference from across the country and around the world. We have people registered from more than 60 countries and more than 33 states in the US. Welcome from everywhere in the world. In these just few brief minutes, before I introduce Andy Hoffman, our keynote speaker, I wanted to give you a quick summary of the first day of the conference, which is not easy to do because it was amazing. I also want to just let you know what's coming up today and how best to engage online with this amazing community. Yesterday, we had 9 fantastic sessions, all of which will have their recordings posted and PowerPoints on our website, which we're posting in the chat. On the website, as you can see in the color-coded schedule, the sessions fall into 5 categories. Keynote speakers, like Andy Hoffman is coming up next, deeper and systems thinking for sustainability, curricular insights for schools, student-oriented insights, and practice-oriented insights. Let me briefly describe a few of these from yesterday. First, we learned from our keynote speaker, Stuart Hart, about how the challenges of global sustainability, including climate change, environment, poverty, and inequality, demand a fundamental reinvention of business education for the 21st century. Stu described the University of Vermont Grossman School of Business's Sustainable Innovation MBA program, SIMBA, which represents such a bold attempt at reinvention. In his presentation, he described the strategy and design of SIMBA and suggested how it might serve as a model for the creative destruction of business education writ large. Next, we learned about systems and systems thinking, how normal will never be the same, how local depends on global and global depends on local, systems constructs, and the SDGs from our colleagues and my co-authors, Linda Kelly, Bill Russell, and Nalini Kumaran. Following that, Meta Morsing, the head of Prime, gave us an overview of Prime, including a preview of what I thought was an incredibly exciting new framework on the impact-based university in the decade of action. Next, we heard about a phenomenal resource-rich opportunity to integrate the SDGs in your curricula from the SDG Academy, including their free SDG online academy, MOOCs, thousands of videos, community of practice, and more. Following that, Nikki James from Northeastern University gave us a fascinating deep dive into how to help students link business outcomes to the SDGs using experiential business projects. Jack Harris from SUNY gave us several great real-world examples of 2-class projects introducing a model for teaching strategic industry research through collaborative research and application of the SDGs. Following that, Jeff Robinson and Lanier Richardson from RBS spoke about the work they're doing at the Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development, CUDE, to accelerate urban innovation and integrate the SDGs in an urban context in Newark, New Jersey. Last but not least, our colleagues from NYU Stern School gave us a deep dive into their curriculum, where they are embedding the SDGs into their first-year Intro to Business course with more than 600 students, and their 4-year undergrad core curriculum, and described in detail how they do it. All that happened yesterday, and we have an incredibly exciting day today, which I'm going to review in a minute. But first, let me give you a few housekeeping notes about how best to navigate and participate in the content of the conference and how to get the most out of it. You're all in Entergy app now, and basically, I highly recommend that you create your profile and use Entergy to select and link to any or all of the sessions. When you click on schedule, you will see all 4 days, and by clicking on any particular session, you can learn more about it and also bookmark it. All the speakers are listed with their bios, and once you select your sessions, you will have your own unique program under My Event. You can also receive notifications from our conference organizers and see the list of attendees who have chosen to share their information. You can send messages to them to registered conference participants. As a reminder, audience members' mics are muted, but you can submit questions in the Q&A panel located at the bottom of your Zoom screen during webinars and on the chat in Zoom meetings. You can feel free to chat, and we will be saving the chats. But if you have a question for the speaker, please post it in the Q&A during the webinars. We also will be recording all the sessions and posting them in the coming weeks on our website, as I mentioned. After each session, please click on the star for that session and then rate the session with 1 to 5 stars to share your feedback on that session. There will be a full conference feedback survey going out on Thursday afternoon after the close of the conference, and we welcome and appreciate your feedback. If you have a Zoom-specific technical problem, please do not contact me. Please contact Zoom support directly. At this point, I am absolutely delighted to introduce Andy Hoffman. Andy is Professor of Management and Organizations, Professor of Environment and Sustainability, and the Holcim Professor of Sustainable Enterprise. The Holcim Professor of Sustainable Enterprise at the University of Michigan, a position that holds joint appointments in the Stephen M. Ross School of Business and the School for Environment and Sustainability. Professor Hoffman's research uses organizational behavior models and theories to understand the cultural and institutional aspects of environmental issues for organizations. He has published over 100 articles and book chapters, as well as 16 books, which have been translated into 6 languages. His bio goes on, and I don't want to take too much time to read it, but I will just say a few more things. Among his amazing list of honors, he has been awarded the Responsible Research and Management Award in 2019, the Distinguished Faculty Award for the Organizations and Natural Environment Division of the Academy of Management in 2018, the Aspen Institute Ideas Worth Teaching Award in 2018, the Aspen Institute Faculty Pioneer Award, on and on. It actually goes on for half a page. Andy is amazing, and I'm sorry we took a little bit of your time, so let's move on and welcome Andy Hoffman. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Jeana, for that introduction. Let me share my screen here. Okay, let's go here. There we go, that should. Okay, well, thank you for that introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. As I was watching this start up, I was watching the chat, and I saw Philippines, Thailand, Argentina, Norway, and of course, New Jersey of people coming in. So I think we've got quite a range of time zones here. So hello, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation to speak today. I want to begin my remarks with a story, and the story, I've got a problem here, hold on. Oh, brother. For some reason, I can't advance my slides. Anyone have any idea what's going on here? There we go. When I started at the University of Michigan in 2004, something happened, a major event happened, and that event was Bernie Ebbers. Bernie Ebbers started WorldCom, built one of the largest telecom companies in the world. And then he was found guilty of cooking the books, an accounting fraud, and sentenced to prison for 24 years. And I was struck because as I walked around the building, no one was really talking about it. And that seemed odd to me because this was a guy that got to a level that we would like all our graduates to get to, a success by any measure of any business school. And now he was a disgrace. He is going to prison for a good long time, and no one was talking about it. Finally, I got on the elevator, and there were two professors in front of me, and I was brand new. No one knew who I was, and there were two senior professors, and one looked to the other and said, "What do you think of that sentence of Bernie Ebbers?" And the other one said, "I think it's ridiculous. It's not like he killed somebody." Now, I've always thought about that statement. I've always thought about that observation, because to my mind, that represents an example of the extent to which we do not hold business people responsible for the power that they hold. I mean, Bernie Ebbers damaged a lot of people's lives. He ruined people's retirement accounts. He put people out of work. The stock went from to zero in a matter of days. I mean, it was the biggest accounting scandal in American history until Bernie Madoff came along and beat it. But that, to me, is we do have to come to terms with the tremendous power that our graduates are going to have, and to connect a responsibility to that power. That was true in 2005, and it's even more true today. We are entering what scientists call the Anthropocene. We as humans are impacting the environment in ways that have been unprecedented. We are now an animating system in the environment. And how did we get here? The market. Population growth. Population growth combined with the market. When I was born, there were 3 billion people on Earth. Today, there are 7.5 billion. That just really staggers me, because think about it. It took us about 20,000 years to go from 0 to 3 billion. And in the course of my short lifetime, we've more than doubled that. And if I'm lucky enough to see 2050, we're going to hit 10 billion people. And the market is providing for all those people. Business is doing this. Business must solve it. The market is the most powerful force, orienting force on Earth, and business is the most powerful entity within it. And so business has to be turned towards solving the problems you can see on this graph here. If you're not familiar with this, this is the planetary boundaries. And the green zone represent boundaries beyond which we should not go if we want to maintain a safe operating system for human and other life forms. And you can see we're crossing some. Nitrogen and phosphorus. It's causing the algae blooms in the Great Lakes. It's causing the dead zone at the mouth of the Mississippi River. Land system change, biosphere integrity, basically known as species extinction, and climate change. We are changing the world around us in fundamental ways, in systemic ways. And so the response to this challenge has to be systemic as well. That system has to be the market. The market has to adjust to deal with it. And when I say market, I include not just business, but I think of the institutions of government, of the civil society sector. All parts of the market need to adjust in a systemic way. Interestingly, we have two choices ahead of us as we start to think about kinds of problems that we face and the solutions that we're going to have. We can have a dystopian future, or we can have a utopian future, and then anything in between. On the dystopian side, we can have continued disagreement and conflict, no clear authority, science is relegated to opinion, and there'll be pressures to maintain the status quo. This should look familiar, because we do see elements of that in our society today, namely around the climate change debate. Or we can have a utopian future where there's agreement and consensus and there's collaborative engagement. Scientific results are elevated, the status quo is seen as untenable. This is some work that Deb Jennings and I have done, and we make a parallel of that utopian future to the Enlightenment of the 18th century. And I know that there's some political baggage that comes with the Enlightenment. It in many ways ushered in an era of colonialism. But what the parallels we find are quite interesting in the extent to which the Enlightenment took 100 years. And our conceptions of ourselves and the nature around us were fundamentally transformed. Before the Enlightenment, we saw nature as unknowable, and we were at its whim. With the Enlightenment, we decided we could treat nature like a machine, take it apart, put it back together again, and we could dominate nature. In this present reality of Anthropocene society, we have to recognize that nature and human history, nature and human societies are intimately linked. and they co-evolve together. And that co-evolution is managed through the market. The market has to be turned. The institutions of our society have to be turned. Now, we're getting an interesting test right now on how society will respond to a collective challenge. And we've seen some of our institutions doing well and some not so well. And hopefully we will come out of this with a gut check. What institutions need to be strengthened? How do we need to adjust those institutions to go forward? And importantly, there will be people that come out of this that want to snap back to where we were before, just like a rubber band. It's what they know, it's what they benefit from. And people around us need to push for change and bring change about. We are fortunate in that call because before COVID hit, people were beginning to ask questions about capitalism, about the market. We were re-examining capitalism. Paul Polman, CEO of Unilever, called capitalism a damaged ideology that needs to be reinvented for the 21st century. Joseph Stiglitz, who I've really enjoyed his work, has been really pushing on income inequality and has said that capitalism is in need of being saved from itself. I could go down the whole list here, but you can see that there are people not just outside the market, but people inside the market that's saying that there's a problem, that the market is not working, that we've got some problems. Andy Grove saying we're at a strategic inflection point. And you can see the result in our young people. They're becoming disenchanted with capitalism, and they're starting to become enamored with socialism or some anti-corporate voices out there that are really trying to push for simple solutions. And so where do we go from here? How do we handle that? What is the problem? To my mind, the two major failures that are causing this re-examination of capitalism are in the natural environment and the social environment. The social environment is quite scary in my mind, but so is the natural environment. On the social environment, we are seeing inequality in this country, not seen since the Depression of the 1920s. Some staggering data. In 2014, the top 1% of households held 38.6% of the nation's wealth, while the bottom 50% had negative 0.1%, and that's not a typo, negative 0.1% they had in aggregate debt. Before COVID-19, nearly 40% of Americans were unable to pull together $400 in an emergency. 78% lived paycheck to paycheck. 44% earned $18,000 a year or less. And 42% had saved less than $10,000 for retirement. Those people before COVID were living in financial dire straits, on a precarious line. COVID has thrown them into those dire straits. And that should concern us. If 40% of Americans could not pull together $400 in an emergency, they're in that emergency now. And when I talk to people about this and I say, what would you do to put food on the table for your family if you were in that situation? And the answer is always the same. I do what I have to do. Think about it. If 40% of the people in this country are thinking, I have to do what I have to do to survive, that should make you very nervous. On the natural environment side, climate change threatens to have tremendous impacts on human societies around the world. Scientists have said we should stay at 350 parts per million. We're now over 400. And cost of the US economy alone could be between 54 trillion and 69 trillion by 2100. These dangers are real, and I think the wildfires in California have really brought them to vivid relief, the challenge before us. Now, if we think about re-examining capitalism, think about changing capitalism, how do we start to make sense out of it? How can we think about this? And to my mind, we have to shift from reducing unsustainability to creating sustainability. That's not an original idea. John Ehrenfeld has been writing about this, others as well. But reducing unsustainability fits within the business logics that we've been teaching in business schools for decades. And this is the way I've been teaching it for quite some time. You just frame sustainability as operational efficiency, cost of capital, consumer demand. The market doesn't have to shift. You just have to connect it to what the market already knows. That's reducing unsustainability, doing less bad. And we have to shift towards creating sustainability, creating a better world, doing good. To think about the difference between these two, think about the difference in Iraq. The United States stopped a war. And we're learning that it's a very different process than creating peace. We could say the same thing about Afghanistan. It's a totally different mindset, a totally different approach, getting down to the fundamental levels of who we are, what we're doing, what we're trying to do. Think about it this way. We could think about reducing greenhouse gases, or we could think about going carbon neutral, or we think about going carbon negative. And I find this a fascinating shift, because if you had asked me 10 years ago, carbon neutral, I would have thought, you know, that's going to remain a nice theoretical concept. Academics will talk about it. It has become a practical issue now. It has moved beyond the theoretical and now has become real. And you can see that companies have claimed to have set targets, or some have claimed to have actually gone carbon neutral. And some are even pushing to go carbon negative. Some countries are pushing to go carbon neutral: Iceland, New Zealand, Costa Rica. And within the finance sector and the insurance sector, I think some very interesting moves to disconnect from fossil fuels, to start to change underwriting practices. That will shift the market. And so we are seeing some moves here. We are seeing some moves towards this utopian future within the market. Now, to my mind, business education has not kept pace. Business education has fallen behind in really adjusting and engaging the conversation that I see taking place within business. And that's why I think Prime is so important, to try and foster change within business education, because it's really necessary. Two of the most scathing critiques I have seen, and I commend these two articles to you, questioning business school education, challenging business schools, is these two articles here, one in the New Republic, one in American Affairs. The first one was written by an MIT Sloan MBA, the second from a Harvard Business School graduate. And these are just snippets of what they said about business education. John Benjamin writes, elite business schooling is tailored to promote two types of solutions to the big problems that arise in society: either greater innovation or freer markets. Proposals other than what's essentially more business are brushed aside, and the curriculum stifles discussion of the common good while emphasizing the overriding objective of profit maximization is unquestioned. Sam Long, equally critical. American business schools produce, quote unquote, a business elite dominated by financiers and their squires, presiding over a disordered economy, gutted of both its productive energy and the ability to generate mass prosperity. These are some pretty damning critiques, and the articles are pretty fascinating. Now, you know, in the face of these kinds of critiques, we have to ask, what are we doing to our students? What kind of education are we giving them? And what are we going to do to adjust to it? Some have suggested that we just tear the business school apart. An article in The Guardian says, call in the bulldozers. We should bulldoze all the business schools. And in fairness, business schools have been facing problems and repeated calls for realignment through the years, whether it's the Enron scandal or the Great Recession or even the COVID crisis, and the responses have always been incremental. And that will not solve the problems that we face. There has to be a fundamental shift in the foundations of business education. That's what we need to do. So what I'd like to do is offer 9 points as a way to get the conversation starting. This is my 9 points. There are many out there, but many ways to approach this problem. And I'd like to walk through 9 that I see. The first, I'd like to see us instill an ethos of management as a calling. If any of you are familiar with Rakesh Khurana's book, From High Range to Hired Hands, it's a history of the American business school. And what he found was quite interesting. When the first business schools were proposed, the university said, you know, this isn't an area of academic inquiry. And the sponsors came back and said, no, we're going to teach the pillars of industry, of commerce, on how to serve society. We're going to train a professional class of managers in the mold of doctors and lawyers to seek the higher aims of commerce in service to society. The conclusion of his book is that we've effectively retreated from that goal. And going further, he says that it's leaving a gaping moral hole at the center of business education and therefore management itself. Professional and moral ideas that once animated and inspired business schools have been conquered by a perspective that managers are merely agents of shareholders, beholden only to the cause to share profits. The time has come to rejuvenate the intellectual and moral training of future business leaders. We need to connect the power that our students are going to have with the responsibility that comes with that power. And to my mind, the best way to do that is instill in students a sense of responsibility, a sense of a calling, a personal vocation, in the same way that we train doctors and lawyers to serve society. That's what their primary goal should be. Not that they shouldn't make money, but that they have an obligation to society. So it really comes down to that, in my mind, to start there. If you want to see some really interesting critiques of what we're doing in terms of business, James Gamble, a corporate attorney, has been writing some really interesting essays. And he goes on to say that the system in which we put our business people compels them to act like sociopaths. They run their companies, quote unquote, as a textbook case of antisocial personality disorder, in which it is obligated to care only about itself and to define what is good as what makes it more money. And I think that's what we are instilling them in business schools as well. But the best way to counter that is a connection to conscience. And that's what the idea of a calling does. It asks students to examine their conscience, examine what kind of a business leader they want to be, what kind of a legacy they want to leave. And I'll tell you something, my students really resonate with this idea. Next, rebuild the business school on a system of aspirational values. And this is important. This is not simply a call for a value statement on which to brand a business school and then differentiated market, which is something business schools are facing right now. It's called to make a clear declaration of the aspirational principles that will guide all aspects of the business school structure. How it selects and socializes students, structures a curriculum, curriculum and pedagogy, invites recruiters, chooses role models to come and speak, accepts donations that often leave a physical and cultural imprint on our facilities, and guides the research and rewards of our faculty. We need to make a statement about what kind of a world we want and what kind of aspirational principles will get there. When I bring this up with my colleagues, a number of them get quite uncomfortable. They say, we don't have the legitimacy to step into such a value-based domain. And I always roll my eyes because we are teaching a set of values already, whether we like to acknowledge it or not. We are teaching, for example, that continuous economic growth is possible, that government has a limited role in the market, that the environment is an unlimited source of materials and a limitless sink for waste, that people are driven largely by avarice, greed, and self-interest, and that work is merely a supply chain input and the worker is merely a human resource. These are exploitive principles, and they are embedded in our curriculum. Sumatra Ghoshal wrote a wonderful paper saying that some of the problems in business can be traced back to business schools. And to fix them, we have to change some things. We have to stop doing others. And so we have to shift from a focus of wealth extraction to a focus on wealth creation. Those are Joseph Stiglitz words, where he goes on to saying, moving away from wealth grabbing or rent seeking, trying to steal a larger fraction of the economic pie, and towards a recognition of the true sources of wealth of a country and the ability to get wealthy by creating wealth and contributing to society. So rebuild the business school on those kinds of aspirational principles. To do that, I think we need to de-emphasize the core. Far too much attention, in my mind, is placed on the tools of management, which are called the core, whether it's strategy, accounting, finance, operations. And we don't devote enough attention to educating students on how, where, and why they will deploy these tools. At present, we teach knowledge, and I really like this model here. What we do in our research and what informs our teaching is we take data and we look at relations and we create information. We take that information and we look at patterns and we create knowledge, and that's where we stop. We need to take that knowledge now and apply principles to create wisdom. We need our research to focus on wisdom, and we need to teach our students how to think wisely. Because the truth is, wise business leaders do not make decisions solely on knowledge, such as pattern information, regression analyses, and p-values. Instead, they assess that knowledge and make a decision based on wisdom, vision, character, judgment, integrity, ideas that are sadly missing in much of our business school curriculum. Number 4, move beyond simply monetary measures. Whenever I hear a student precede a statement by saying, speaking as a business person, I challenge them to stop and reflect on all that is excluded from that one simple statement and the extent to which it grants license to narrow one's focus and exclude applications of wisdom and the broader moral, cultural, environmental, and social values that it entails. When the market becomes our only language to understand the problems around us, the solutions are going to be impoverished and by definition incomplete. We need to start to focus on other measures of value beyond money. And to do that, we need to bring in enough natural science into business education to teach business leaders, future business leaders, how their decisions affect the natural environment through resource extraction, supply chains, manufacturing, consumption, and disposal. And we also have to teach them enough social and political science to understand how business activities affect the social environment through tax policy, wage requirements, and healthcare. Number 5, we need to train stewards of the market. Business schools need to develop a new kind of leader, one that's focused on mastering the domains of commerce, but also recognizes that they have an interest and responsibility in maintaining the integrity, stability, and equity of the system in which they'll practice their craft. And to do that, we have to teach them capitalism in all its forms and its history. Too often we just take capitalism as a given. We don't question its form or function, but we need to understand how there are multiple forms of capitalism out there. Scandinavian capitalism is different than American, different than Japanese, and how we got the one we have today. Capitalism is actually quite malleable, and it can evolve over time. And if it's no longer serving the needs of human beings, it can be adjusted. It has adjusted in the past, it can adjust in the future. How can we expect students to be able to understand how to change capitalism, how to amend it, if they don't understand how it works? How it got to where we are, what options are before us, where it's failing. This will challenge us to move beyond some simplistic notions that we teach in business school. For example, let's expand the pie. Let's just grow wealth. Let's create win-win solutions. Those are by definition very simplistic, and they really center around the idea that the wealthy can stay wealthy and will just bring everybody up. It leads to our ideas about trickle-down economics. There are some difficult distributive decisions that have to be made that if we're going to create a stable and sustainable market and economy for others. Number 6, re-examine the purpose of the corporation. If I walk up to any MBA student at any business school, Rutgers, Michigan, anywhere, put a mic in front of them and say, finish this sentence for me. The purpose of the corporation is to, they will parrot back, make money for the shareholders. Even to the point where many of them mistakenly believe it's in US corporate law, which it is not. And so this focus on the shareholder really leads to some very dysfunctional outcomes. And Lynn Stout has written quite a bit about this. I like her work. It focuses on one kind of shareholder, those that are focused on short-term profits. It leads towards connecting corporate compensation, CEO compensation, to short-term returns. And that leads to some dysfunctional outcomes for corporations. And many are turning away from it. Even Jack Welch, who's passed away now, famously known as Neutron Jack, one of the biggest devotees to shareholder value, has come out and said this is the dumbest idea in the world, quote unquote. He went on to say shareholder value is a result, not a strategy. Your main constituencies are your employees, your customers, and your products. Whether you make money is a metric of how well you do this. To my mind, this brings us back to the ideas of Peter Drucker, who said that the purpose of the corporation is to create and serve a market, serve the needs of a constituency within the market. Profits are one metric of how well you do that. But it ultimately, quote unquote, the business enterprise exists for the sake of the contribution which it makes to the welfare of society as a whole. This is the kind of idea we need to instill in our business education and start to think about what is the leader of such a company, because that really does transform our conception of the leader. Number 7, discard misguided metrics and models. Shareholder primacy is not the only problematic notion that we teach in business schools, in many ways almost as gospel. Many of the metrics we use for economic calculations lead to actions that worsen our social environmental problems. For example, standard discount rates. If we use a standard discount rate of say 5 or 10%, if we just use a straight line method, That says that, say, a 10% discount rate, everything 10 years out and beyond is worthless. Is that really true? That's called your children's future. Nicholas Stern created a healthy debate on this when he calculated the cost of climate change. He said there are places where using discount rates, standard discount rates, is inherently immoral. And he used a very, very low discount rate and got a lot of blowback. We can walk through gross domestic product and the extent to which that leads us into some pretty skewed directions. And we can look at all the models, whether they're in accounting and finance, marketing, our human resource models, our organizational models. In many ways, they're so outdated. Just focusing on the last one, because I'm in the organizational behavior department, I am very frustrated by the extent to which we focus an inordinate amount of attention on multinational, publicly traded companies. And there are many other ways to structure an organization, whether it's a B Corp or an ESOP or a co-op or a hybrid organization or a low-profit LLC. The multinational shareholder company is not the only model that's out there. So moving forward, bring the government back in. I am stunned by how many business students think that government has no role in the market and that regulation is unwarranted intrusion in the market. This is really dysfunctional, it's really naive, and it's really destructive both for the companies that these students will work for and the societies that will serve them. I am stunned on how few business schools teach courses on lobbying, and sadly, how few of those teach the idea that lobbying can be a public good, it can be a public service. Government needs information to create regulation, and lobbyists can provide that information. All lobbying is not bad, but if we don't teach students about lobbying and we don't instill in them the idea that lobbying can be done for the public good to create a stable economy, a level playing field, a sustainable environment, we're doomed. It's that simple. Government needs to be brought back in to set the guardrails on the market in a serious way. Jerry Taylor has been really writing some nice stuff, a former libertarian who came to a recognition that there's some problems here with the libertarian ideal, because the last time I saw a country and an economy that didn't have a strong government, I looked at that as a failed state, and that's not what we want. The government has a role, and rather than debating over more or less government, let's start to have a serious debate over the right kind of government. 9, and finally, pay proper role or proper attention to citizenship. The mean starting salary for an MBA graduate in 2019 was $110,000, while the top consulting firms offered an average salary of $165,000 with an average signing bonus of $65,000. Let's bring it to the other end. In 2018, the median CEO compensation was $18.6 million. And the question I would simply ask is, to what end shall business leaders devote this wealth? Will they involve themselves in the world around them, or will they take that money and shutter themselves inside gated communities and just hoard their money for their own benefit? Should we bring people in to show our business students what you can do as a business leader, whether it's joining a board of a nonprofit or a hospital, whether it's your philanthropic efforts, whether it's your becoming much more civic minded. If we really, I feel like too many of our business students think that they're going to make a difference in the world primarily through the economic sphere, and they forget that they're citizens of the world and they're citizens of our country. And we need to bring that back in a serious way. Those are my 9 points to start as a way to just really fundamentally change the underpinnings of business schools. I would point out that there are serious obstacles to doing this. The first is, this is a systemic challenge. All aspects of the business school world have to move at the same time. That's not going to be easy. You really have to change the entire ecosystem, whether it's business schools, whether it's recruiters, whether it's the education of our PhD students, all across the board, the entire system has to change. You know, if one school decided we're going to develop a new system of metrics to evaluate our faculty, focusing on the ideas that I put forward, a junior faculty member would be very unwise to follow them unless they were guaranteed tenure, because they need a saleable packet on the market. And so all business schools have to move together. We have to change the rewards. Right now do not reward this kind of behavior. The famous paper we all read in our organizational behavior class, The Folly of Rewarding A While Hoping for B. If you want to see why business school professors do what they do, look at the rewards. And the rewards do not focus on developing new courses, restructuring the curriculum, connecting to practice. It's about our academic journals, and that's a problem. Certainly the rankings get in the way in a very serious way. The rankings place schools in a commodity trap. They really stifle innovation, and they homogenize our business education. I would challenge you that for the most part, the core curriculum across business schools is fairly uniform because we're all taught the same curriculum. We all teach the same curriculum, and the rankings really stand in the way of that. And we need to start to rethink what we are as scholars, pushing the idea of the engaged scholar. I heard a lot about that from Chancellor Cantor about the idea of publicly engaged scholarship. I think that's critically important, and it requires a rethinking of the role of the academic in society. Now, those are the obstacles, but there is hope because I think change has begun. Within the business world, there are questions being asked. BlackRock, the CEO, Larry Fink, sent a letter to CEOs telling them they have a responsibility to make a positive contribution to society. The Business Roundtable has come out with a statement redefining the purpose of the corporation as investing in employees, protecting the environment, dealing fairly with suppliers to assure the future success of our companies, our communities, and our country. And I like that because it's situating the business within a system, moving beyond the sociopathic ideas that James Gamble talks about. And after Davos, the World Economic Forum redefined the universal purpose of a company as one that serves society at large, supports communities, pays its fair share of taxes, acts as a steward of the environmental and material universe for future generation. Now that puts the company within a linear, a time-based system that we have to think about the future. Now these are aspirational statements, and we have to watch to see how this conversation progresses, to see if this is brought about in tangible action. But it's time for business schools to step into this debate as well and start to engage this conversation and help it forward. The pump has been primed by these kinds of statements and this kind of conversation in the business world, and we have an opportunity to step in. And we can start to see change there as well. Up at the upper left, the Aspen Institute has its Ideas Worth Teaching Awards. And you can start to see some really interesting courses being developed around the country, and they publish the syllabi around the world, I should say, not just the country, around the world, and they publish the syllabi as models for others to replicate and adapt to their own purposes. You can find courses like Reexamining Capitalism at the Harvard Business School. Rebecca Henderson has developed this course. The students are devouring it. They're very interested in this topic. At the Darden School, you have a course on economic inequality. At the Adencia Business School, you have a course on alternative economic models. And at the Yale School of Management, you have the End of Globalization. These are just a taste of some of the courses that are starting to be developed out there for people starting to ask new ideas about what's the market, what's being done out there. On the right, we're starting to see some changes in the promotion process that has me rather excited. You're starting to see some schools are adding, at my school, added a fourth criteria called practice to its annual review of the standard 3 of research, teaching, and service. I'm seeing some schools allowing the tenure and promotion process, students to write practice statements and even get letters from people from the business world. What a radical idea, rather than just other professors who are really good at writing A-level publications. You have the Responsible Research and Business Management Network, trying to get the journals of our field, the top journals of our field, to start to promote more research that has practical impact in the world around us, and focusing specifically on the Sustainable Development Goals. And you're starting to see changes in the accreditation process. The ACSB has started to include societal impact of business school teaching, research, and outreach. So all of these lead to the idea that change has begun. If you think about Foster's S-curve, we're at the beginning of that curve. Will it continue and grow and permeate the market, or will it die on the vine and retreat back to prior pre-COVID standards? That's up to us. That's up to all of us to try and promote change and diffuse these ideas going forward. And one big pressure that can help us get there is our students. Our students are there already. I taught a course last winter, Business and Democracy, Advocacy, Lobbying, and the Public Interest, a brand new course. It was joint between the School of Public Policy and the School of Business. I thought I'd maybe get 20, 25 students because You never take a first-year course, just like you never buy a first-year model car. You want to work the bugs out. I filled up at 70 students. I had a waiting list. The students want this content, and it's really important that we give it to them. You can look at surveys all across the board. It's been growing. Student interest in these topics has been growing. Most recently, in 2020, a survey found that business ethics entered the top 5 most popular subjects for the first time among MBA students. Nearly 25% of incoming students wanted a job focused on social impact after graduating, and nearly 50% wanted to do so later in their careers. I see it in my students. I'm sure you see it in yours. When I first started teaching in business schools back in the mid-1990s, most students who wanted to change the world, they went to schools of government or nonprofit management. Today, they're going into schools of business in increasing numbers because they see the power of business to make a positive influence in the world, and they want to steer business in that direction. That gives me hope. That gets me really excited. So those are the thrusts of my suggestions. I want to close with a simple thought to try and push this forward. And to do that, I want to introduce you to my grandparents. This is my grandmother. She was born in 1899. She was died in 1995. Think about it. When she was born until the day she died, she saw the advent of indoor plumbing, the advent of indoor electrification. She saw the first car, first flight, man land on the moon. She saw the first computer. She saw all this and more. She saw so much change in her lifetime. Now think about our students. How much will change in their lifetime? If you take the year they were born, at 80, that is the year they will die. Challenge your students. What will the world look like then? I can tell you that we can't imagine it. If I had told my grandmother the world she would die in when she was their age, she would have said, "You're out of your mind. That's never going to happen." That's how much will change. And I think the pace of change is accelerating. The challenge for our students is, what role do they want to play in making it the world they think it should be? The challenge for us in business schools is to give them the tools and the skills, the knowledge and the wisdom to play that role in making the world what it needs to be. That's my charge to my students. That's my charge to you. I just want to add finally a little bit of a plug here. A lot of these ideas are going to come out in a book in February called Management as a Calling. I'm really excited about this concept, and I think my students really resonate with it. I hope it really catches on. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and we will open it up to questions. So Jeana, it's all yours.
Great. So if you look at the Q&A, you have a number of really interesting questions. I'm going to start with the one from my partner, Mike Barnett, who says, "Hi, Andy. Do you think markets can ever drive social and environmental sustainability enough to save us? Where does formal regulation fit in here?"
Yeah, regulation is critically important. Anyone who thinks we can get there without regulation, it's not possible. We need to bring regulation into our education, bring regulation into the market in a constructive and informative way. As I said, I think too many business school students think, when I taught this course, joint between the School of Public Policy and the School of Business, I asked the students, "What do your peers think about this course?" And there was a very interesting response. The business school students said some of them their peers looked at them and said, "Why would you take a course on that? What does government have to do with business?" I mean, that's jaw-dropping to me. The public policy students said, a lot of their peers said, "You're taking a course at the business school? I can't even believe you would step foot inside that building." They were going into the belly of the beast. That's the problem. The business school students think government has no role in the market. A lot of business school students think that government students think that business is bad. We got to bring these communities back together again and find a constructive way for them to work together. If we can't even do that in school, how do we expect them to do that out in the professional world? So Mike, government is critically important, and we need to really rethink the relationship between business and government, start teaching lobbying, start to teach constructive lobbying. That's what I'd like to see.
Fabulous. Okay, Gerard Farias from FDU says, "How do you address consumption? And how do the companies on the creating sustainability side address consumption?"
Great question. So many of the challenges we have before us is really about asking the right questions, and that's one of them. Right now, I think most of us can't conceive of a market not based on consumption. Yet we'd all recognize that consumption is the problem. We all can't consume our way to a sustainable world. You know, the Tesla is a great car, but it's still a car. And the answer is not more cars. The answer is alternative mobility. And so we have to rethink consumption. And that requires some very, very challenging and interesting thinking. You can look at what Patagonia is trying to do, for example, with their Wornwear initiative. They're trying to get people to get excited about the idea of buy it once, buy it well, make it last, hand it on to somebody else. With your clothes, clothes tell history. If you have a leather coat that your father had, that's a cherished possession. You know, so how do we get beyond notions of planned obsolescence? How do we disconnect profits from material consumption, from energy use? These are the questions. I have no answers, but we'll never find the answers if we don't ask the questions. And that's one of the questions. So I put it right back at you. Challenge your students, see what they come up with. What is the alternative consumption?
Fabulous. Thank you. Ricky Abzug asks, we have many, but not all management faculty / researchers on board with and through Prime. But how do we get to the academic finance, economics, and accounting folks?
Yeah. Yeah. Tima Bansal and I did a handbook on business in the natural environment for Oxford. We had all the different disciplines. We had the chapters broken out by the departments in a business school. And the hardest ones to fill were accounting and finance. Even at my business school, I remember when the last dean, put forward positive business as one of the pillars on which the business school was going to be founded. The accounting and finance faculty came back very hard and said, are you saying we're teaching negative business? What are you trying to say here? It's a challenge. You know, what becomes our focus is driven in large part by what our journals and our theories and our fields see as, you know, theoretically driven questions. And a lot of my peers, my colleagues in accounting and finance, don't see anything novel in these topics, and we have to change that. If we move more towards engaged scholarship, I think that can start to happen. But how do we bring in accounting and finance, find some of the models out there, get to the journal editors, get RRBM to get to the journal editors in those fields. Our research trajectories are in some ways faddish. They're driven by the gatekeepers of our field. It's not like the 286 begets the 386 begets the 486 chip. And so if the gatekeepers can start to say, these are the important issues we got to focus on, and if you want to be published in the top journals, these are the questions you got to ask, the field will move. I hate to make it sound as simple as that, but change the rewards, change the behavior.
Great. I can't resist saying that our very next session at 10:30 is on accounting. Yeah, with Hildegard Link from Rutgers and 2 professors from Brooklyn College, called An Ecologist and an Accountant Walk into a Bar, Ecosystem Services in Business and Government Financial Reporting. So there are people working on these areas.
Very good.
Another question from Gerard. Here's a heavy one. Do we have time to wait for the conversation on aspirations to take place? The climate clock in New York City gives us 7 to 8 years.
Time, yeah. You know, I struggle with that. I mean, it's a very difficult question. We're talking about transformative change. So what I hold on to is the idea that, you know, if you think about Thomas Kuhn's ideas of the structure of scientific revolutions, transformative change happens in sudden bursts. It's not a linear process. It comes down to people using the events that happen around us as triggers for that change. We're in that trigger right now. COVID, it's our event. If you really want to drive change, COVID is it. Now we need to take advantage of this shift, this event, frame it in a way that says the market can't keep going as it was before. We're in a crisis. Our schools are in a crisis, our financial crisis, higher ed's in a crisis. and the market's in a crisis. And if we keep teaching business schools the way we taught them in the past, we're just going to repeat the recession, the Great Recession, the challenges we face right now. So could it be that we're at the midst of a period of revolutionary science that Thomas Kuhn talks about, where we can come out with a new set of ideas, a new set of foundational principles? I'm resisting the word paradigm shift. I think it's used too much, but we are in a period where we can take advantage of this to say the new normal has to be fundamentally different.
Wonderful. Okay, I have a long question. I'm going to read it to you from actually a two-part question from Kent Williams. Two-part question. In considering a shift in language and consciousness towards the positive, do you not believe we need to frame the hubris idea of saving the planet and shift more explicitly towards saving humanity from itself? That we need to create sustainability to ensure a future for humanity. Planet Earth has been here 4.55 billion years and will most likely evolve after we are gone. That's part one. Do you want me to ask part two, or we'll start with that one?
Let me start with that. Absolutely. I mean, the idea of saving the planet, to my mind, is an Enlightenment idea. It still gives us primacy to be in charge of the natural environment, and we are not. That's what the planetary boundaries, that's what the Anthropocene is pointing out, is that, I love the quote from Stephen Jay Gould. He says, we have become, by the glorious evolutionary accident called intelligent, the stewards of life's continuity on Earth. We did not ask for it. Wait, we cannot abjure it. Wait, we did not ask for it, but we cannot abjure it. We may not be suited to it, but here we are. We have no idea how we got here. We totally screwed this one up. We got here by accident. And the notion that by our rational logic of the models that we used before, we're now going to fix it. We need to come to a new conception of recognizing that there are things we don't know about the environment, and therefore we should leave it alone for its own sake. So if we say save the planet or we say save humanity, both of them, to my mind, say that we are the center of it all, and therefore we should do it for our benefit. When I think we need to start to come in, I love the Aldo Leopold line. He says, in the final analysis, appreciation for nature boils down to an act of intellectual humility. I really like that idea. We could use a little more humility of recognizing the limits of what we know. I mean, especially as we start to entertain ideas like geoengineering. Are you kidding me? We're gonna start to tamper with those systems that we've altered by accident and think that we can manage them on purpose. That's the kind of hubris thinking that the Enlightenment has brought us. I'm not saying throw out the scientific method. I'm not saying throw out, rationality. All I'm saying is amend it and bring in a recognition of the limits of our knowledge and the limits of our agency, and recognize that sometimes we should protect nature merely because it is, and not just because we benefit from it.
Brilliant segue to the second part of the question, and this will be the final question, part two from Kent Williams. Have you thought about bringing nature experiential learning, i.e. nature retreats, into business schools to develop social ecological systems thinking to fundamentally change the way business students view nature, something that is outside of us, a resource to be exploited?
That is a lovely idea. I want to call out my colleague Judith Walls at University of St. Gallen. She's looked at board members and tried to analyze what kind of constituency, what kind of backgrounds lead to decision-making that is more in line with sustainability. And what she finds is people with more experience in nature, more connection to nature, make better decisions when it comes to nature. If we could bring that into our educational curriculum, show them not just the beauty of nature, but also what we're doing to it. We can do that, through firsthand experience. We can also do that through, I think art and the humanities are critically important for getting people to feel things. The exhibit Anthropocene, if you haven't seen it, will really make you stop and think about what are we doing in the world around us. And so bring that into the education process as part of our natural science indoctrination, to recognize that your decisions on supply chains are not environmentally inert. They have tremendous implications. And the waste of your processes, the plastics problem that's out there is really stunning and startling. If you see the amount of plastic washing up on beaches in Asia, scuba divers swimming through the ocean surrounded by plastic waste, a lot of it coming from our industries, you'll start to rethink the ultimate end of what you do. So I think that's a wonderful idea.
Excellent. Would you like to take more questions, or shall we wrap it up there and we can send you?
It's your call. It's your call. It's your agenda.
Okay. Well, this has been an incredibly inspiring, enlightening, and profoundly important conversation. And we want to thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. We're thrilled about that.